I like being a woman artist, and I like being an American artist, and
but
I would show in groups. I would show in that. I don't mind being in women's shows, and I don't mind being in American shows, and voila. Biala?
Oh, I have no problems about it at all. I don't care what they think.
As long as they show me.
No. Anyway, and I'm only sort of not a real American either. After all, I was born here, and that makes a difference to them too.
Born in
very
Paris
much
or
so.
in...
No, I was not born
Or
in
in
Paris,
Europe,
but
is it?
I was born in Europe.
In Europe.
I was 10 years old before I went to the United States.
I always say 6.
Well, you could say 6, but it was... No, and then I have a great many French friends.
Yeah, well, that's the difference in France. You see, in France, if you're born in Europe, you're European for the rest of your life. Or in America,
No, you're an American for the rest of your life.
or you're an
They
American.
prefer it because it's more exciting to them.
To be American rather than European?
That's right. After everybody else is European, so what's a big deal about that? But if you're an American, you're a foreigner, and everybody likes foreigners in a way, except Monsieur Le Pen.
Except the Frenchman.
it wasn't that you're specifically nationalistic. It's just that you have certain habits, certain customs that you carry with you no matter where you live.
You know, it's like...
Well, your easel is your country, really.
Yes, okay.
You're what?
Easily.
Your easel, unless you
Yes.
paint on the wall.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the way I always felt that was my country,
Yes.
because in a way I have no real country the way you guys do. So the easel is my country. Wherever my easel is, that's where I am. It's a very big problem. If somebody is a very good painter and is a bitch or a bastard, can they be wholly bitch or bastards? Can they?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Because the thing with Ezra Pound too is he's a little equivoque, you know. What made that man make those terrible things over the Italian radio? You know, Ford quoted the prose of Hudson, that his prose came on the page the way grass grows. That's a phrase that always stayed in my mind, because that's the way I like to paint too. So that you're not conscious of anything, but it's suddenly there. There's a picture by Titian when I first saw it, which was just like that. It's as if the paint had been thrown on the canvas and it happened to take that form. That, I think, is the very height. Naturally, very much against what all these boys and girls are doing now.
Biala, can you tell how you chose your name?
Well, I was born in the town of Biala, and I must admit I was pretty homesick for the first 10 years or so. And then when we started to paint, Jack and I were taken for Mr. and Mrs. So I thought, to hell with that. And I decided to take Biala. That's all. It's easier. And that's how it is.
Do you remember the town of Biala?
And I don't remember it the way I remember the street, but yes, I do. It's a nice little town. It's very much like a French town. That's why when I came here, I immediately felt at home. The same dogs going around with a very business-like air. And there's the smell of bread. I arrived in Paris at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the bakeries were just making their bread. And it was just like in Biala.
And then you went from Biala directly to the United States?
Yeah. See, that's the difference between Shirley, Zuka, Joan. I suppose nothing forced her to stay here. But they really came here through other circumstances, not especially because they wanted to come. But I read The Three Musketeers. Me and Mr. Barr says he rereads The Three Musketeers every year. And that's something for a big politician to say. And you can't get away from the fact that Dumas is still selling as if it was gone with the wind, huh? So that gave me mon petite idée de la France comme de Gaulle, huh? And I've always been in love with France. And I have a real passion for Paris.
Do you paint differently when you're in America than when you're in France?
No, not at all. I mean, I just paint the best way I can, that's all, anywhere. But you know, with time, you start in something else. I don't think I've changed terribly, but Shirley says I have.
In what way?
In the painting.
But in what way?
I don't know. She hasn't told me.
Does the light change
In the pictures?
in the pictures, depending on where you are?
No.
For instance, the light of Providence or the light of Venice, does that make itself?
No. It's only the light of the picture. I don't say this to everybody, because people read things into your pictures that aren't there. I mean, that woman who wrote the preface to my show, for instance, she said, you can't say anything new about Venice. That's because she doesn't understand about painting. You can say anything new about anything. Because there are 550 million ways of doing a picture. I could have gone on painting on it the rest of my life. You just change the pictures or the color of the windows or something, and it's a totally different picture. And as it is, I spent about 1.5 years changing it.
This seems to be one of the most musical of your paintings.
Well, I am very much, I'm not musical in the least, but I have very restricted taste in music. It's mostly Mozart operas, actually. But Mozart said, he said that music is where each note loves the next one. So between that and painting being like grass growing, that's my whole philosophy. Very old-fashioned.
There's a kind of theme and variations.
Yeah, well,
like
that's what it
fugue,
really
right?
is, yes. Obviously.
Also, it's one of the most abstract of your paintings. I mean, it's, you know, windows, they're represented, but each one of them has an abstract painting inside them.
Mm-hmm. I did think at one time of just making a picture of one window. Maybe I'll do it yet. But I tell you, I'm worried still about the future of my paintings. I don't know what's going to happen to them.
What would you like to have happen?
Well, I'd like them to find a home. See, I have no market here, so there's nobody to protect the pictures. And I have no market anywhere if it comes to that. I mean, I've sold a certain number of pictures in the United States in the last 12 or 13 years. And those are the only ones I feel maybe have a future somewhere. But what's going to happen to all these? What am I painting? Going on stacking up more and more pictures.
Can we go back to the time in France when you were living with Ford Madox Ford? What was his response like to your paintings?
Listen, Ford was the most generous man on earth. And he encouraged everybody that could possibly be encouraged. To him, there was nobody greater than me. I mean, I was going to be the pride and the hope of American art or any kind of art. So he was a great feminist, you know. He worked with the suffragettes in England.
What were you painting in those years in Toulon?
I was painting Ford. Oh, I used to paint landscapes, still life, you know, the usual thing. But we led very hard lives. I didn't have too much time to paint, but I did paint.
And what paintings were you seeing at that time?
Well, for one thing, when I came over here, I saw the reason why so much French painting looked the way it did, like Utrillo, for instance. I was crazy over Utrillo. And when you come here, you understand all about Utrillo. I mean, it's Paris, it's what it is. And I was crazy over Matisse. Often, all the people that you should be crazy over. Also liked Soutine very much.
When you came back to New York during the war years, were you in contact with the abstract expressionists?
Oh, sure.
Was that essentially the circle in which you associated?
Yeah, well, my brother, as soon as we came back, told us we ought to know de Kooning. So he introduced us.
Did de Kooning respond to your work?
Well, de Kooning certainly said he did, but, you know, it wasn't serious enough at that time. Because I hadn't I couldn't work very much all the years with Ford because we were too busy trying to earn a living. So I really began to paint with Alain.
Did you and Alain meet in France or in America?
No, we met in New York. But de Kooning, oh sure, he was very, very flattering, but you don't know about de Kooning anyway. You don't know about anybody. Anyway, I was picked as one of the 35 or 350, I don't know which, best American painters for that famous thing presided by, what was the ex...
Barr? Alfred Barr?
Barr, yeah. Yeah. But this is just to show you, you know. It was exhibited in the Whitney Annual when they still had paintings. So I was very close to abstraction a number of times.
Is this what your painting was like also in the 50s when...
No, this is only, I've never been able to stay put with only one thing. I mean, I did maybe 10 pictures like that. Like the other one.
I love this yellow painting.
It's wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful.
I was trying to imitate the glass in Chartres.
Ah,
Then to my astonishment, I found out they thought I was influenced by Joan Mitchell.
it has something of her palette and her stroke.
Well, I certainly didn't think of her, that's for sure. But I did a whole string of them. You know those wonderful blue glass windows in Chartres Cathedral. That's what I was measuring myself up against. Well, what kind of pictures do you want to see? Recent one?
What year was that, Biala? What year is this?
Oh, it wasn't such a long time ago.
Is it a fairly recent painting?
No, it's 67. I remember Giacometti saying that if it's good, it's modern. And I think you might say that is my style too. It's impossible not to be modern, actually. Even when you're not modern, it's impossible not to be modern. Because in spite of yourself, you paint like the painters of your time. You can always tell in what period something was painted. What else can I show you? You want to see the sketchbooks?
Yes.
This was in India.
Do you always carry a sketch pad when you go out?
I used to carry one of those little ones.
Is that a study for a painting?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a study? Did that become a painting?
Well, yes, I've done a painting. That's Ramin in Pipak. A painting like this, on which I worked a great deal, and many of my paintings, they are the sum of all the mistakes that I made. And that's the way they become, you see. You get a piece of this and a piece of that, left over from something else, and finally it makes a whole. And that's the mystery of all those spaces. It's going to be very interesting to see what the other ladies have to say.
About abstraction or
No,
anything
about
other?
anything. No, about anything.
Do you see what kind of relationship do you see between yourself and Zuka and Shirley?
Well, they're two painters whom I admire very much, and two people whom I very much attached to, especially Shirley. Zuka too, but in some ways I'm more attached to Shirley because somehow she's more open to attachment. I mean, Zuka has already got a husband, she's got a grandson, she's got this, got the other. But I like Zuka very, very much. And I like her painting very much. Shirley, because I can't even discuss Shirley's painting, see, to me she's a more important painter than Joan, if we must make these comparisons. And she's far more interesting, I think.
Do you feel that your appreciation of your work would have been different if you had stayed in America, or was it
I don't
greater
think
for
so.
being here?
I really don't think so. That's what my brother was really very much upset that I were going to live here. And as Wally said, he never forgave France for my living here. But yeah, I'm the kind of person who, wherever I am, I'm not there. I mean, whatever you have to do in order to have a career, I don't have it. And he didn't do so goddamn well either, for that matter, and he was there. Whereas, at least I lived the kind of life I wanted to live and where I wanted to live it.
I met Biala when she sublet Joan's studio on Rue Daguerre.
That was when?
When was it? It had to be sometime
It was
before 1968.
No, it was just at the time of Suez. We came back just as everybody was expecting
That's
the war
73,
over Suez.
56.
And everybody
56?
thought, yeah.
Uh-huh. Because I lived there quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know of each other?
No, and furthermore, she was suspicious of me for 15 years. She didn't trust me. It took her 15 years.
What I realize is that one, I did a kind of painting you didn't like that immediately presented a real...
Listen, you surely didn't like what I did either, but it made no difference to
I don't
me.
know whether I looked at it very much, truly.
Hmm.
That's a painting, however, in New York, the Stable Gallery, and I liked the show very much. But I realized that, what year
Which
was
one?
that?
I don't know. I had several shows there.
It was the same year that I had met Joan. It was in the early 50s, before you moved in there. I wasn't in New York that often. And I did feel that you belonged specifically to something that I called at the time French painting. And
Yeah,
I was
no, you
very
still do, don't you?
differently. And so I think there was a gap between us that was perfectly natural at the time. Everything we look at has a sense of dissonance, and I want my paintings to have that sense of surprise and happening all the time. Forms have a sense of the same reality that one might have about a chair or a table or a lamp or a person. What I want a picture to have is presence. I want it to exist. If somebody sees it as decorative, there's nothing I can do, but I see decoration as ultimately gratuitousness to make something beautiful, which I don't deny. I mean, it can be done, but if I make changes in a painting, it's for its expressive quality, not because I want to make the picture look prettier.
Are you concerned with beauty on any level?
I don't really think about it at all. Beauty has never been a consideration for me, which many of my friends deplore. In fact, in these three pictures, what I did feel is that there was almost, that in some of the paintings, it almost verged on something almost ugly, awkward. And ultimately, I left those forms, even with the potential for that connotation, because it worked in the painting. And particularly in these three, I felt it very strongly. And the one at the end, it's on the limit of figuration. But I thought I would dare to keep it that way.
Is figuration a danger then? If an image, a shape becomes recognizable as something?
Well, I don't want it to be that recognizable, but it's unavoidable. There was a time earlier on in my painting career when I tried to avoid at all costs anything that even approached what I saw as figurative. And now I care less, because I care about the totality and also the risk of that happening and not happening, the ambiguity.
Did you begin as a figurative painter?
Never.
Not even as a student?
As a student, I did certainly figurative landscapes, life drawings, and so forth. But my preoccupation was never capturing the literalness of any kind of event that I was looking at. It never has interested me, which I find rather curious. I've always wondered about that.
What did your paintings look like in the 50s? You were already living in Paris then?
I came here at the end of 1949. My early pictures were very undefined. When I began more seriously to sense what I wanted, I also involved myself in the abstract expressionist experience, which ultimately was unsatisfying for me personally. But I can see a link between those paintings and what I'm doing now.
In the sense, the relationship between gesture and movement?
Exactly. I had a strong inclination to try to compose in a gestural painting. I also wanted to have an ambiguous form. And I kept searching for an ambiguous form. And the movement mattered a great deal.
Did any of this have anything to do with being in France rather than in Paris rather than being in New York?
I think I've been very influenced by what is around me, by what I see, by the friends I have, the work that has been done around me, by my comprehension of various movements.
Which in particular?
Well, let's say abstract expressionism as it was used by Kimber Smith or Sam Francis or Rhea Bell or Joan Mitchell. And I realized that, there's still issue from the first generation of American abstract paintings. I wasn't interested in Rothko or Barney Newman or Motherwell. It wasn't that direction in art that interested me. But I felt that there was another way to go and that finally nobody was doing it. And that I had to at least make an attempt, even if my means were not enormous. And at that time I felt that we're getting back, we're losing track about France and America. I think I had the possibility of working here, more so perhaps uninfluenced than I might have been in America. But it's an iffy question.
Was that important to be in a place where you would be less influenced?
Perhaps. When I say influence, it's not influenced by other artists. It's influenced by your environment, by your family, by your. It's the expectations of those people who are close to you.
You once said to me that you thought being in France gave you something more of an intellectual edge to your painting than it might have had you stayed in New York.
There's a strong confrontation here with intellectualism, with concept, and being aware of it. And finally, Paris is a rather small place. One can't avoid it. Provided me with a kind of foil, of material to use intellectually, to think about, and also to realize that I'm not, that I think, but that I'm not involved with intellectual concepts as such. It's not that I don't think, but that I want to put them down in visual. I'm involved with visual matter.
Do you think painting is an endangered species at a time when there's such emphasis on conceptual art as opposed to a concept in painting?
As I have expressed myself elsewhere, I really think that painting will continue because there are people who want to paint. It's a question of having something to say, and I don't think enough painters think about it. I don't think they think about why they're making this gesture on the canvas, aside from the fact that it's very satisfying to make a gesture on the canvas, and that one has to go beyond that. Painting has to mean something, it has to say something, and that I think it's impossible to try to do something that was already done. For one thing, you're not living in the same generation when that something was done. You're very contemporary. What you're looking at is other. And that one has to try to seize the material in the world you live in. Which is why I say what I'm getting is really from France. From New York would have been quite different. And I don't know in what way, had I lived in New York, I would have resolved some of my pictorial problems.
A number of writers in the writing about your work in the past have made the analogy to Stuart Davis and also to Matisse. How do you feel when those comparisons are made?
By now, I'm one used to having comparisons with, say, Matisse or Stuart Davis or whomever else somebody will think about. And I think it's inevitable that people want to have a reference someplace. I think it's false. I can imagine why there are those ideas. And it doesn't concern me anymore. What I do, if at all, have a reserve about is when people look at my paintings and say, oh, they're so gay. And that upsets me. Because I want more than that. I want a sense of life. In Paris, I'm almost against the grain because everything is so very organized and beautiful and harmonious. And I try to fight against that, although it's entered my system, I know. And in New York, I'm always struck again with the dissonance of things. And I wonder what I would paint like in an atmosphere like that. And I was very involved with all my American friends and what they were doing. It was Kimber Smith, Joan Mitchell, Sam Francis, Riopel. And we made a group. There were peripheral members. There was Ann Weber, there was Shirley Goldfarb. There were a lot of women, in fact, if I think about it.
Who came about the same time you did?
Maybe more or less. Of course, Zuka and Biala, whom I met later. Zuka I met later also, not at the very beginning. I lived next door to Jules Olitsky when my first year here. But since then, there hasn't been as potent a group of artists that I have associated myself with. People have come and gone. And then there's a lot of artists whom I have met, whom I don't consider as close, who are not as close artistic friends, but whose work I admire a great deal. I like Baraglio, I like Piforetti. I admire Hantai's work.
What does it mean to have a gallery in Paris?
What does it mean to have somebody who stands up for you? And I think it's very important. And I'm extremely fortunate because Jean Fournier is not what I would call a commercial gallery. He really is involved with the progress of his artists, with their possibility of developing their work. He would love to sell as much as the artists would like to sell, but that's not the primary object. Although it has to be at some point.
Has the response in France to your work changed over the last 40 years?
Oh yes, because there has been an increased interest in what I do. There was at the very beginning because I was a part of this group, certainly amongst artists, but I've never had a big following. And certainly that hasn't developed that much. Except more and more people know that I paint, and more people will look at what I paint. At a given moment, there was almost no one who really was concerned.
Isn't that very difficult?
It's probably difficult, but that's how it's been.
I love Los Angeles. That's where I would go.
And where would you go, Shirley? New York?
I think I'd be able to live almost anywhere, and somehow create
Well,
a
when you
life.
have to, you can.
Yeah, I'd like to go to New York, but I have a feeling that if there were certain circumstances that sent me off someplace else, I'd go.
I'm so small, shtetelde, comment dit-on ça en français?
You're speaking English, dear.
Oh, I'm so provincial in my tastes. The part of America that I love are those small towns.
I think that people think of me as an American artist, and as an American, I sort of brandish the flag always. I mean, I'm sort of professional American. I'm always defending America, and I enjoy that role. So I don't really know. I do know that, people don't. I've never been shown as a French artist.
Well, you've been shown as an individual.
I've been shown as an artist, yeah. I know that my subject matter, I don't think if I was living in America that I'd do American history.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
I don't know. I don't think so. It just seemed so unusual here. I mean, it was so attractive to do here, and I don't think there it would have been. I don't think, but how do you know?
American
How do you
Revolution.
know? Yeah. How would you know? And I said, would I have done the French Revolution? I doubt that.
I've done
very
the
much.
American Revolution.
I might have done cows, maybe. But anyway.
What was your painting like when you first came to Paris?
Sort of expressionistic, a little bit like it is today, actually. Less color, maybe, and I did things that I saw in Paris. I mean, sort of cityscapes and people. Everybody was painting abstract at the time, and I've never really been an abstract painter, in the sense that I need subject. I'm a subject painter.
Really, most of your paintings, from what I know, have been done in series according to certain subjects.
That's
How
right.
did you choose your subjects?
Well, as I say, I must have spent a couple of years painting cars. I painted cars because, and in a way, they're very much like the cows. They're sort of all over, multicolored cars. Yeah, I was sort of hunting a way of doing portraits, and the kids were fairly small. And once my husband came back with these plates, these series of great French men or great men, I thought, oh, what a terrific idea! I would paint the American founding fathers, because. And I went and got, I got all kinds of images on that and started. And the first one I did, which I still have, is this one, which is Thomas Jefferson. And then they became, more formalized and I very flat colors. I went through a period of, and then I did the founding fathers, in the first, the American Revolution, of which I knew very little, beyond the Washington and the cherry tree. There wasn't much I knew about it, because American history, they don't teach you too much at the time. At least they didn't in those days. So I read a lot, got a lot of books, got a lot of images, and did a lot of paintings. And then I did a whole big series of California Indians without white men. And these were collages, you see. This is wallpaper. And it's supposed to be this is Death Valley. And the Bennett family is arriving into Death Valley. They made a mistake, and this is the story of the 49ers supporting. They go into Death Valley, and of course, this is the Indians watching them come in, and they're dancing and running away and doing all kinds of things. Anyway, they come in and they get lost and they practically die, and then when they finally get out, they say goodbye to Death Valley, and that's how Death Valley got its name, supposedly. I continued with collage until the French Revolution. I mean, I did maybe 3 shows of collage in Indians. I decided maybe now I can do French Revolution. And I was a little self-conscious about not knowing French history and not being French, and dare I touch French, you know. And in a way I was right not to have, but I mean I did, because I did it. And when I started, you know, I couldn't get away from collage. I mean, like, that is a painting of Robespierre and Danton. And, you know, I painted it, and it's painted very flat. And then when it was finished, I said to myself, but I just couldn't not put collage, something collaged on it. So I have the pieces there on the colors. You know, the white stuff is collaged, as is the piece of wallpaper there that is the vest of Robespierre. But the rest is painted. But it just, I couldn't do a painting without putting something pasted onto it. This is the king and queen coming back going to Paris from Versailles. I mean, forced to go back by the women and the, you know, were joined by the army and by the men. And it's when the women marched to Versailles, and then they forced the king and queen to come to Paris, and that was the beginning of the end for the king and queen.
Does it feel like doing history painting? Doing 20th century history painting?
Well, that's what I
That's what
thought
it is,
I was
yeah.
doing, yeah. You know, I mean, for me it was very real. I mean, it's satirical maybe, but not terribly, I don't think. Yes, I felt I was doing history. I always call myself a history painter, but it was never taken out too much by anybody. You know. I love doing this. All my battle scenes I just love doing, because I don't know, my family from my father's side were all in the artillery. I mean,
In the Russian army?
in the Russian army. Yeah. My grandfather was a general. And my father was in military school from the age of 7, I think. I never was interested, but when I started doing Valmy, I started going to Invalides, and I swear I got very excited about it. You know, Valmy was a very windy place with a lot of windmills, so I mean they have one windmill left. Well, and I have a whole bunch more. You know, I have the Victory, and I have soldiers and all kinds of
So there are 85 paintings documenting the...
No, 85 were on the French Revolution. Then I did 30 on Valmy and Varennes. And then I did 30 more on women in the French Revolution. The ultimate, not the ultimate, but that's Indian, the Indian painting. And it's supposed to be, it's pretty abstract, as you can see for yourself, I think. Anyway, these are 2 witch doctors dancing in front of the bonfire. And that is the sick person, and they're trying to cure the sick person who is seated down below, you see? But I love to do collage because I found the challenge of doing a bonfire with paper, just terribly exciting. Why? See, what happened was, you see that portrait of Robeson?
Beautiful.
I did this whole series of I did a whole series, which I totally, I didn't work. I mean, it was a disaster. And it was called The Men in My Life. And I think it's a terrific subject, and one day I will do it. I have a whole bunch of paintings. And the men in my life were sort of, when I was a child, I've always been infatuated with people, you know. And my first was Tarzan, Johnny Weissmuller. So I thought, you know, what a terrific idea I do Johnny. But Johnny Weissmuller in his first 2 or 3 movies, because then he got puffy and fat. Paul Robeson, because Paul Robeson came to Hollywood to make Showboat. And he was studying Russian, and he needed a Russian teacher. And somebody said, gave my mother's name, and he would come to our house. I mean, can you imagine? This is in the middle of the 30s. This enormous black man coming into this petit bourgeois, neighborhood. We lived in a house in the back in Hollywood. This limousine would come, and a black man would come, and he was just darling. My mother would allow me to sit at the lessons, and he would sometimes sing, he would talk, he would tell stories. I mean, he was just... So after that, I was, of course, my mother and I were madly in love with Paul Robeson. I went to see Eros at the Grand Palais, which was an exhibition of Greek love on vases, art on vases, on the Greek vases, with the subject, all kinds of love. And there were 3 male angels, nude, with wings. And I thought, oh, what a terrific idea. I will put the 3 male angels in all the paintings. And they will be doing what my hero did, you see. And it's still a good idea. It's just that I didn't do it. I mean, I did it badly. It just didn't work. That's all right. Well, this is no longer cows, but... Oh, I was telling you about the cows. Well, anyway, that is Tarzan. And the angels, you see. And the elephants. And cheetah, you can see, yes. And what else? There's one of my husband and the grandson somewhere. Here it is. And that was 1, 2. That was the last man in my life, the grandson. These are the angels. I mean, carrying gifts, and Baba, and one of them is black. I finally made one black because I thought, don't ask me why, but anyway. And this, I think, is a pretty good painting. I like it. When I showed these to Dorothea, or my dealer, she'd sort of say, well, it's an interesting idea, and but nobody wanted to show them, and nobody really liked them that much. In the meantime, I had been doing watercolors for the last few years as sort of for fun out in the country. Not for fun, but I mean, in the morning I'd get up and I'd love to go out and do a watercolor of cows, because out in the country we have this house in Burgundy, and they have these white Charolais cows all over the place. And actually, I paint more calves and everything. I mean, that's a bull. Practically none of these are really cows, but it's the bovine. Anyway, so after my fiasco with the men in my life, I thought, what if I tried doing paintings of cows? And it seemed terribly daring, to do paintings of cows. But I started, and it became... I became very sort of like not obsessed, but I enjoyed painting cows, because in a way, I suppose, it got me out of this illustrative mode that I had gotten into with the French Revolution and the men in my life. And I like color a lot. I like to use color, and I like to play with color, and dare using color and things. And with the cows, I feel very free to... you can't do Errol Flynn with a green face. I suppose you could. I mean, that was my problem, I think. Whereas a cow, you can make it green or whatever. So, voilà, that's the story of the cows.
And then when did you start doing cutouts of cows and putting them into paintings?
Well, I have done a lot of collage. I enjoy collage very, very much. I mean, cutting. I love to cut. I suppose, cutting, Matisse said that it was like sculpture. But, when you're drawing, you try for things, whereas with cutting, it happens. It doesn't always work, but you cut straight to the subject, and you can allow you can go very far and it still works. whereas with drawing it's more difficult to do. I did these books. I don't think you ever saw them. They were illustrations of famous French poets. It's Aragon, Les Yeux de Elsa, you see. Exactly, Les Yeux d'Elsa. I don't know if... These are, as you can see, you know, Paris postcards with wandering cows on them. This one I like very much.
Notre Dame.
Ouais. It's sort of it takes on religious tones, I think. Huh? My Nikki
Do you see all paintings now with possibilities for cows?
I did for a while. No, and I had sort of gotten away from that, but for a while there, I was doing that.
That's wonderful.
And that's a cow on a cow. This is a funny one. I think. Les Daumiers. But you do get, you know, into this so-called mode of thinking, and for a while there, I couldn't look at anything without. Particularly an image, though. I mean, an image of a painting. Maybe not so much a painting. Although I did go visit somebody right when I was in the middle of this, who wanted to show me his paintings, and I kept thinking, "Oh, I put the cow right there," you know. But I didn't say it. Voilà. Oh, this is Shirley Jaffe.
When did we meet?
You know, I think it was in the 60s, and I think that I don't remember the first time sort of thing, but I had seen your paintings at the American Center.
It wasn't 58 or 59.
And then
You wanted to meet...
I wanted to meet American painters.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I knew Yvonne Hagen, and she was writing for the Tribune at the time. And I represented no danger to anybody, so...
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I was just painting my portraits or cars or whatever I was painting at the
You
time.
weren't painting portraits then, you were painting cars.
Cars, yeah, okay.
Because I immediately went to see your work.
And,
So it's not a question of presenting danger, it was...
No, well, not the word danger, all right.
I find
careful.
that a
Let's be
false
careful of
word.
our terms.
I find it a false word, yes.
Yes, well.
But I'm counting on Judith to edit out everything that we shouldn't have said.
Or keeping it all in.
Okay,
Keeping
all
it in
that makes
because
more-
I think
yeah,
it
yeah.
makes more much...
A little more spicy or